Well, let me
our
ask you that.
ears.
I'm curious because when you talked about the new technology of the 90s where we're able to study the brain so much more, do we really understand what we're seeing? I mean, I always worry about that with my medical history background. Is the technology now, I mean, now that we can see so much more, how sure are we that we understand what we're seeing? And I'm wondering how much this new technology has to do with what a lot of people admit is the overdiagnosis of ADHD. Are we not really seeing what we think we're seeing? Or are these things really not problematic, or are they not really connected?
Roger, looks like you want to.
My take on the situation is that to the degree that there is overdiagnosis, it's happening much more in the social context and has to do with the nature of our educational institutions, expectations. That's the level at which it's happening, and that is yet only partially informed by the advances in technology. I think what we're seeing with MRIs, with SPECT imaging, with EEG studies is greatly enhancing our ability to understand how the brain actually functions or the ways in which it dysfunctions. So I think that the technology in this case is really clarifying the situation.
And I think a good example of that is, on a practical level, we knew that some of the psychostimulants took a very short period of time to work and disappeared in a very short period of time. Research studies now literally document the moment because you can actually follow the amount of neurotransmitter that is in the synapses of the brain, because they can actually study that. And they say, oh, the neurotransmitter's down, the behavior's back, because you can now actually monitor people doing the activity. So we now can have a child read and monitor their brain and see how it's functioning based on oxygenated blood without any danger to the child. So that at Yale, where Shaywitz and Shaywitz are, they have this Connecticut longitudinal study. They've been doing this now for 20 years, following children into adulthood. That's how we know that you don't outgrow ADHD. Again, go back to my book in '75, we used to talk about by the time you're adolescent, you outgrow it. And the answer is that's not true. Now we know that half of the people who are medicated for ADHD as children may end up medicated as adults. Different medication maybe. So science is catching up with the art of ADHD, and in fact helping us not overdiagnose as much as we used to, in the sense that we're more knowledgeable, not that we can use the science for diagnosis. It's still, there is no instrument to diagnose ADHD, no test that you can give, and that is the diagnostician's problem, and of course why, as Sue and Roger, you have to do all these other things.
So let me ask you, when families come to you, I would think that if they have a child that they define as a problem or a teacher defines as a problem, they're hoping for a diagnosis like ADHD. And if they're told, no, it's not ADHD, that in itself might be a problem, because it seems like, oh, if we have a quick fix, if we have a medication. So what happens to the families when you say, no, it's not ADHD? What kind of dynamic happens then, and how do you continue to work with them?
Well, typically I'm not the one they hear that from, because I don't diagnose. When they leave my office, they know what a diagnosis of ADHD will mean. They also know the options as far as what medications are available. But oftentimes, more so than looking for a quick fix, what I hear is parents don't want a diagnosis at all because of the stigma related to ADHD and some other things. And it's difficult to get parents to kind of agree that if it is ADHD, we may need to look at different meds or that kind of thing. Parents typically think they can fix it on their own, and having had a child myself with ADHD, I thought I could fix it on my own as well. So it's really a big part of getting them to accept that this may be something you can't fix. You can't on your own change the way you parent necessarily, and that's probably the biggest hurdle I have to get over. And once they're there, then they just want a diagnosis. They want to know what can we do and what will treat and make my child successful.
And let me ask both Fred and Sue for suggestions. Who do parents go to? I mean, who typically do you go to if you suspect ADHD? What kind of diagnosticians are there out there? Because I would imagine it's many different disciplines that you can go to discuss this problem.
I would say it's typically the pediatrician, the first place they go.
That's the first line of...
I think that's what happens. I think the teacher, the student assistance team, or how you call them, the IST team.
What does IST stand for?
Interventions team.
Strategy.
Same thing.
Yeah.
But they basically will say to the parent, we have some concerns. This is something you might want to consult your physician, and they'll usually go to their pediatrician. Pediatricians vary. Some of them will try a medication just on a medication. Some of them are much more sophisticated. And one of the statements Sue made I really want to follow up on. We really clearly know that medication alone does not solve this problem. That even if the diagnosis is confirmed, medication may be the first course of action, but it is necessary but not sufficient. Family counseling, how an ADHD child impacts a family, things that have to go on in the school, what we call a 504 plan, which stands for Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, is an accommodation plan that children with ADHD are entitled to. Some school systems give them individual education plans based on other health impairment because it's a neurological condition, but it's a package. What you eventually want to sell is a package. Because if you want the child to get better, medication alone won't do it. The research is clear about that. Got to do other things. So then you have the issue of what does the pediatrician do? Well, if he suspects ADHD, depending on how the community is set up, and I remember in the days when I was in private practice, some of the pediatricians would say, I have this information, I'm really not comfortable doing this, let me send you for a psychological evaluation. And then we would do a psychological evaluation and report back what we thought was going on, and then the physician would, and we would make recommendations that were comprehensive. We would also look at the kinds of things Sue's talking about, which is medicine, family, child, how that child's going to impact the family, discipline, parenting, put the package together, and coordinating with the school.
And next week, we're going to be talking about treatment, so we'll be able to follow up exactly on what we've been talking about today. I want to thank our guests, Roger Wilkens, Sue Meeks, and Fred Krieg, for joining us to talk about ADHD. For upcoming episodes, viewer feedback, and important links, log on to our website at the address that appears on your screen. Thanks for joining us on HealthVision, a production of WOUB Public Television.